And welcome to another edition of the College Pride Press podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brad Kreppel, and we are back here for our second Sunday in a row here, getting into the routine of the Sunday recaps. As always, my co-host, Brett Siegel, and we are back with our usual breakdown of everything that went on in college basketball this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about some headlines. I'm going to give you my player of the week. We're going to do buy, sell, sweat, don't sweat. We're going to recap some games and then preview what is going to be a fantastic week in college basketball with Thanksgiving and so many great tournaments coming up. So I want to start off just kind of throwing off to Brett to get his opening thoughts as we always do to kick us off. So Brett, how's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. I mean, it was a pretty interesting week in college hoops. Some pretty good news headlines and the whole uh, ball situation and then the whole Chinese thing. And I mean, that's all behind us now, thankfully, and we can move on from all that. But UCLA faltering, we got Northwestern faltering, and just some upsets throughout the week. But the main thing was the Duke Michigan State game and then Kansas Kentucky, and those are some two really good games that came down to the second half and really great basketball if you got a chance to watch it. We got to see some young bloods with Duke getting at it and Grayson Allen just having a show in that game. And then Michigan State, Jaren Jackson, the freshman, putting on a show, Nick Ward, the sophomore, putting on a show. So that was just a great game overall. And then the second game, we saw two teams that it shouldn't have really been a close game for the most part, but neither team really wanted to pull away. Kentucky had their chances. They put up a lot of shots and just couldn't make them. And that's been the story of Kentucky basketball so far this year. And then you got Kansas, who literally played the whole game with six guys because they did not have Billy Preston. We're going to talk about that a little more in depth later. But it was fun. That was a really great night to watch college hoops, and looking forward to a really jam-packed week this week as we got Thanksgiving coming up, which means we got non-conference tournaments coming up, and it's going to be a really fun week.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Champions Classic games in a little bit, and Duncan and I were there, so we'll be able to get some great insight as to what went on and some of the players that really showed off to us. But I want to start off with some headlines, and you mentioned Billy Preston, and that's kind of where I want to start it. He missed his first game because he missed curfew and missed classes on Friday, and then on Saturday he was allegedly in a car accident, a one-car accident, and was unable to play in the Champions Classic because of an investigation involving both the accident and the car itself and how it was financed. So, what are your thoughts on this Billy Preston situation, where it seems like he is always having some sort of issue that's keeping him off this court, and he is a tremendously talented player that has aspirations of being a one and done and a high draft pick, and he certainly has the talent to do it at 6'10" with a great feel for the game and ability to score.
Yeah, my question really is it Billy Preston or is it Kansas? Because it seems like every month in college hoops, there's another Kansas problem. I think it was Josh Jackson had a car issue or something, and then somebody got arrested. I think it was Gerald Vick or something had a misdemeanor, and Azubuike had a problem, I remember, and now Billy Preston. So I don't know if this is just an administration problem, a Bill Self problem, but somebody's got to start watching these guys. I mean, are they not doing stuff together? Like, why is he driving his car to practice? Because supposedly it happened coming back from practice, is what I read. And there were no police reports filed. You can't find any information other than a statement from Kansas basketball that read that Billy was involved in a single vehicle incident on campus. There were no injuries, no sustained damage, and that he was informed right before his pregame meal that he won't play. So I mean, I just don't really know what to think of this, whether it's just Bill Self not monitoring his players at all, or if Billy Preston actually just has problems right now. Like, what do you think about it?
I think it's more Billy Preston. You know, the Kansas issues are obviously glaring. I think that they really don't keep track of their players, but you know, there was he was allegedly smoking weed and posting on the internet, which is really dumb. And you know, and then the issue with him missing class and missing curfew, and now this car accident where allegedly, you know, there's an issue with the payment of his car. I think it's a Billy Preston issue, and I think it's extremely concerning. This young kid has so much talent. It's a shame to see him waste it with stupid stuff like car accidents and missing curfew and smoking weed. It's so dumb. He could, you know, if he works hard for the next 6 months, he could go to the NBA, and then he can buy all the cars and stay out as late as he wants, and no one will really care. But for some reason, he just doesn't have the maturity to you know meet the requirements that he has to in order to play at Kansas and show off his talent on the basketball court. We haven't even seen him on the court yet, which is just absolutely ridiculous.
Like, here's my problem with it. Like, why was he suspended for this UK game when all the details that came out a little bit later, like during the game, said that he hit a curb and it resulted in minor damage to his tires, and as a result, he was suspended from the game. So I just find it really hard to believe that that's all that this situation is.
Oh no, they said it was because like he told them about the car accident, and then they were like, well, how do you have like a Lamborghini? And he was like, oh, like I like because I have a Lamborghini. And they're like, well, who's paying for this? And then that's when they were like very suspicious about who is actually paying for this car.
Why does nobody in the program know about this? Like,
I don't know. That's why it's so sketchy.
Yeah, I know. There's something about Kansas basketball, man. I don't know.
It's weird. I mean, they're still winning Big 12 titles, but obviously there's a lot of off the court stuff in the past few years that are worried about. So next up, we're going to talk about some freshmen that we had extremely high expectations for, and an All-American we had high expectations for, and all of them have been injured. Miles Bridges rolled his ankle today against Stony Brook. Michael Porter's only played 2 minutes with a hip injury. Marvin Bagley gets scratched in the eye by his own teammate. All these guys are banged up. All these guys are top talents, potential top 10 NBA draft picks. What are your thoughts on any of these injuries? Do you think it's going to affect their team or their draft stock in the future?
Oh, without a doubt, it's going to affect the teams. And I think the one guy that's really going to affect the team is Porter. I mean, anytime you get the number one player, since Bagley reclassified, I guess you call him the number two player now. But, I mean, he's pretty much like Ben Simmons on LSU a few years ago. When Simmons didn't play, they got blown out by Southwest Montana by 30. So, and it's going to be the same thing with Missouri. Yeah, they have Jonte Porter and they got a few other guys, but you need Michael Porter on the court. And especially if you're not trying to live up to what LSU did a few years ago and missed the tournament. Like, they need Michael Porter on the court if they have any shot at making the tournament whatsoever. And if they want to be a good team in the SEC, you need Michael Porter on the court. And he's got to be on the court now so he can start building that relationship with the guys on the court. And that way he doesn't start fresh come SEC time. So he's definitely affecting his team the most. If you got a chance to see the Duke game versus Michigan State, you obviously saw Marvin Bagley go down with what looked like a pretty bad eye injury at first. And when they showed the replay, it was really gross, in my opinion. It almost looked like his teammate almost ripped his eye out from his socket. It was just gross to see. And originally he was mouthing that he couldn't see out of it, which raised a lot of concern at first. And then the hype died down from him. They said he's fine. And pretty sure he practiced yesterday with them. So luckily it's not that bad, but it easily could have been a lot worse. So he'll be back probably this week. And then, like you said, Miles Bridges tonight rolling that ankle. And again, if you saw that, that looked really bad. And it was good to see him walk off under his own strength. So he'll probably be day-to-day this week and may sit out 1 or 2 games, just precautionary. But honestly, it's Michael Porter that hurts his team the most. They need him on the court. And I mean, Bagley's a big part of Duke and Miles Bridges is a big part too. But at the same time, like, those two teams are going to be in the tournament regardless if those guys miss extended amount of time. That's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the floor to ceiling for Missouri is humongous. Michigan State, that's the one injury that I think could be rather serious with Bridges, but he looked to walk off. So we'll see when he can get back. And they've got a lot of talent on that team. Marvin Bagley, that's such a fluky play with his eye. I hope he's okay. And he sounds like he's practicing again, which is good. So, it's back to Michael Porter and this mysterious injury where we don't know when he's going to come back. He started the game and played 2 minutes with the injury, but then he came out and couldn't play and had ice on his hip. It's very interesting. He needs to get back on the court and start playing for this Missouri team to reach their potential. And I think for him to kind of live up to that draft stock that he has as well, I think he needs to get on the court and kind of prove to everyone that he is a legit player and he deserves all the hype that he's received. Next up, we're going to talk a little recruiting. I know my recruiting update's been a little delayed. I've been traveling the past few days, but that will be out shortly. So we're going to talk about a 2018 guy that decommitted from Louisville. After Simmons. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but he's a 5-star top 10 recruit that has decided he reclassified um, in his sophomore season. So he's actually in his 5th year of high school. So he's eligible to go to the NBA. What are your thoughts on him potentially going to the NBA versus making a college decision at this point?
Yeah, well, since he decommitted from Louisville, I really don't want to see him go anywhere else except the NBA. I'd be fine with that decision. But I mean, his recruiting as of right now, nobody really knows what he wants to do just because he hasn't reached out to any coaches that have contacted him. So, I mean, it's just all up in the air with recruiting for him. So, honestly, I think if he said that he's going to the NBA today or next week or whenever, I honestly think he could be a lottery pick. I mean, this kid's talent is he's an explosive guard and he's a high flyer. He's shown flashes being able to shoot, but it's kind of like Diallo last year when he went out to the combine and just showed how athletic he is, and he just soared up draft boards. Simmons, I think, would just automatically start really high on draft boards. I think he'd be a no doubt first rounder in my mind. And I think it'd be a good decision if he went that route. He wouldn't have to play overseas like Ferguson did. He could just declare right away, I believe. So I think it would be a good decision for him, honestly.
Yeah, I think it could be a very good decision for him in terms of financially and you want to get to the league as fast as you can. In terms of development wise, not playing in the NBA, he's not going to get immediate minutes on any team. He's going to be, maybe a G League guy that's at the end of the bench developing with a trainer and working out a lot. So I think in terms of that, it hurts some guys that are forced into that role. But if he's comfortable going into that and developing his game while getting paid at the NBA level and not really playing in a lot of games, I think that could be the best for him, as well as any potential NCAA infractions that could be placed upon him. We've seen some players not playing and suspended for those reasons. So I think it could be smart in terms of college eligibility wise. Next up, we're going to talk about a game that we were most intrigued by this week. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to go Xavier, Wisconsin. I was very intrigued to see this one. Xavier loaded lineup. Trayvon Bluett's back. They got a good freshman class as well. JP Mercure absolutely balled out in this game. Ethan Happ kind of did his thing, but I was very impressed by the Wisconsin role players. I knew that they kind of had to step up. Demetric Trice has to have a decent season for Wisconsin to kind of remain on that Wisconsin level. So it was worth center's a great atmosphere to play at, and I really enjoyed watching that game. Two very different style teams. Wisconsin focuses on the post, and Ethan Happ, Xavier more of a guard-oriented team, getting Trayvon Blewett and JP Mercure the ball. So it was two different styles, and it was really an up and down game. And the refs let them play a little bit, which I really enjoyed because the days of the teams and bonuses with like 12 minutes left is very, very annoying, and the refs need to stop doing that. Brett, what was your game that most intrigued you this week?
Yeah, that was no doubt one of the best games of the week, Xavier, Wisconsin. And it came down to the second half, much like some of the big games this week. But my game that I really liked and was intrigued about was Bucknell against Maryland. And that happened, I believe, last night. And Maryland barely won 80-78 at home. And Bucknell, they're 0-4, but they may be one of the best 0-4 teams in the country and maybe one of the best 0-4 teams ever in college basketball. And don't sleep on Bucknell, honestly. They've played 4 straight away games. Yeah, they lost by 1 to Monmouth. They lost to Arkansas. They hung with North Carolina for a while and then almost beat Maryland. So, I mean, their resume is not bad right now. And you look at their team, everybody's returning from last year, junior-wise and sophomore-wise. And there are 4 starters that are returning, all shot over 40% last year from the three-point line, all taking over 100 threes. And that's really impressive. And honestly, Bucknell's that team in the tournament that, yeah, they're going to be slept on because they're coming out of the Patriot League and not a lot of talent comes out of there. But they're going to be a team that's going to end up with a 14, maybe 13 seed. And they're going to get one of these teams that's going to be put on upset watch. And Bucknell has the strength and the experience to make it to the second week. And they showed it in these first 2 weeks of college hoops. I mean, they hung in there with a UNC team, almost beat them on their own court, and barely lost to Maryland last night. And I mean, they're not struggling, honestly. They're playing really good basketball, and it's just early in the season. Not come time for the tournament, I think Bucknell is going to be a really dangerous team.
That's a great point. That was another great game, and I watched that, and I watched the game where Maryland played Butler, and I was very impressed by Maryland. And then they come out against Bucknell, and Bucknell kind of takes it to them. In the second half, they really played well, turned on their game. Kevin Herter is an absolute baller. He can knock down a bunch of shots, and they've got some nice players on that team. So that was interesting. Bucknell's 0-4, but they've got some talent on the team, and they played very well at the Affinity Center, which is not easy to play at. All right, biggest surprise this week. I'll start this one off again. Biggest surprise, Duke playing a zone to shut down Michigan State. They threw a 2-3 zone out there, and Coach K doing his best Jim Boeheim impression, and they really shut down Michigan State. They slowed down Miles Bridges, and they ended up winning that game, limiting the foul trouble as well to their big guys. What was your biggest surprise?
Yeah, I'm going to stay kind of local with this one. I'm going to go with my Louisville Cardinals, home against Omaha this week. At halftime, we were up 40-25. And in the second half, looked like that we were going on one of those runs and going to run away with the game. I believe they were up by 18 or 19 at one point. And then they allowed Omaha to go on a 7-0, 6-0 run at one point. So they were up by 13. Louisville takes a timeout. 30 seconds later, Omaha goes on another 7-0 run, and it's a 6-point game at one point, and completely erasing a 20-point lead. And we take another timeout. It just looked really, really messy out there. And Louisville looks like one of those one-half wonder teams. Like they either have a good first half or a good second half, and that's what I'm seeing so far this season in their first two games, and even in one of their exhibition games against Bellarmine. I mean, it was the same thing. They're not together yet. It doesn't look like that they're all working together. Like Malik Williams is kind of being left out in the dust of things. Even VJ King sometimes doesn't look like he's getting the ball when he needs it. And there were so many wide open people on the court, and these guys just have tunnel vision, and they're not finding these wide open shots. And that's something that will obviously be worked on throughout the season and in practice and stuff. But right now, it's just concerning for me as a fan of Louisville and going to the games that all these guys are returning from such a high level program and a high level team from last year. And it's nothing new. They're playing the same system. They're all playing together again. The only thing that's different is that there's a different guy on the sideline. That may affect things, and it will mess with you psychologically, but you're running the same plays. There is nothing new, and it all comes down to the veteran leadership. Like Quentin Snyder's just hasn't shown me anything impressive this year so far. Ray Spalding finally had a good game on Sunday, but or on Thursday, I'm sorry, but it just wasn't that impressive. He had 19 points and 11 rebounds. He had 1 3 on the game, no free throws, and his second chance opportunities were most of his points. If you want to look at just his shooting numbers and no offensive rebounds or whatsoever, he probably would have been about 5 for 18. So, I mean, second chance over a short team definitely helped Louisville, but it's concerning right now for me. And that was probably the biggest surprise, that they let a team like Omaha come back like that and just dominate them and put up 53 points in the second half.
Yeah, that was impressive, and I think you had some good points about new coaching system. I think they really missed Donovan Mitchell on that team, and he was someone who was able to create his own shot and make shots for others. So next up, we're going to talk about a new segment. I think we're going to kind of work in here. Either Brett and I are going to do kind of a player of the week deal. This week, the player of the week is going to be Alonzo Trier from Arizona. People forget about him. He's had some up and down seasons in terms of suspension and health, but this year he is fully healthy, and through 3 games he's averaging 30 points. And this is not bloated by one game. He had 32 points, 30 points, and 28 points. So he's been pretty consistent, and he's also shooting about 58, 59% from 3, and he is just absolutely carving up the teams that he's playing. Alonzo Trier is definitely a name to watch, potential All-American out there in the Pac-12. So we're going to throw it to Brett to do a little buy or sell.
So this first buy or sell is for you, Brad, and we're going to start off with a Big Ten team that had a lot of success last year, had one of the best players in the country in Caleb Swanigan. And the question is Purdue better off without Caleb Swanigan this year with all the success they've had early on this season? Are you going to buy or sell that?
I am going to sell that. I think they've had a couple nice wins early. The win against Marquette was impressive, but I'm just not buying that Isaac Haas hype. He's very good, and I like the role players around them, but I just think they're going to be one body short, and that body is going to be down low rebounding, and that's where Caleb Swanigan was so good down low on the block and rebounding. In terms of getting a bucket, I think Carson Edwards and Vince Edwards both taking big steps forward. Dakota Mathias is a great defender on the wing. Look for freshman Nojal Eastern to play well as well as the season goes on. I think his role is going to increase, but I'm just going to sell because Caleb Swanigan was so valuable to them for rebounding, blocking shots, and also you could throw it down to him. He could get a bucket, and he crashed the offensive glass and got buckets that way as well. And they just missed that present. Isaac Haas is a big body, but in terms of getting around the floor and getting to the glass, I just don't think he's going to be that guy for them. So I'm going to throw this buy or sell to you, and it's going to go. We're going to the Big East here. Jesse Govan is a dark horse Big East Player of the Year. Are you going to buy or sell that?
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of buy that. I could see him being a dark horse. And right now, early on in the season, Georgetown has things working. Govan in his first 3 games, he's averaging 21 points and 14 boards, and he's shooting 66% from the field. And they just have things working down there or up there at Georgetown. They look really good. And if they're a team that can hang in there with the Big East teams and look good come Big East time, and they can pull some upsets and maybe surprise a lot of people in the standings. I mean, Patrick Ewing's done excellent right now, and I think he's just the coach they needed, especially for a guy like Govan. So, I mean, he's been completely slept on in the preseason in the Big East. He wasn't even an honorable mention, wasn't a first, second team. And Jalen Brunson's the clear preseason player of the year pick for the Big East, followed by Trevon Blewett. So those are the guys that all the spotlight's going to be on. Govan doesn't really have much to prove, except he just needs to be better this year. I mean, there was a lot of hype on him last year. Everybody thought he was going to take that next step for Georgetown, just didn't. Fell down draft boards and came back to Georgetown. This year is kind of like a redemption year for him. And yeah, I could see him being a dark horse for this if Georgetown has a solid year. If they're going to have another year like last year and just completely fall off the wagon, no, he won't even be in the running. But if they're a team that's finishing 4th, 5th, maybe 6th in the Big East, and they pull some good upsets, so whether it's Villanova or Seton Hall or whatever, then yeah, I could see him being a dark horse. I mean, he's off to a solid start, and if he continues this, it's going to be hard to not put him in the conversation for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick Ewing, what a wild card that they have at Georgetown. He's ended up inspiring Govan there, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes on recruiting big men. He's going to be able to coach those big men, that's for sure. All right, next up, we're going to do our segment, Sweat or Don't Sweat. We got 2 teams this week. First team is Northwestern. 2 tough losses. They lost to Creighton on Wednesday, and then on Sunday they lost to Texas Tech and only scored 49 points. It was 85-49 in the final, so it was not a very close game. Are you sweating or not sweating if you're a Northwestern fan?
They didn't just lose to Texas Tech. They got absolutely massacred by them. Like it was not close at all. And nothing taken away from Texas Tech. They look like a really solid team this year, but they lost a lot of pieces from last year, and they are definitely not the same team from last year. And Northwestern made them look like Kansas out there and just dominate them everywhere on the court, not just in transition, not on defense, everywhere. Northwestern, just this past week, looked terrible, in my opinion. I mean, against Creighton, yeah, they played well, but they should have pulled away in that game and shouldn't have even let Creighton get back in it. I mean, to me, it looked like Northwestern could have run away with that game at one point, and they didn't, and they failed to do so. Against LaSalle, they struggled for a little bit, were able to pull away in that one. And then, like I just mentioned, Texas Tech, they got absolutely massacred. So they still have time to turn it around. I don't think it's time to start sweating yet. They got some good games coming up on Tuesday, November 28th. They're going to go at Georgia Tech, which I think is a pretty good game. And then December 3rd, they're at Purdue. So both those games will definitely give Northwestern fans a glimpse into what to expect this year, because those are top 50 teams, in my opinion. And if they can put up a fight against Purdue, who's looking really good right now, and make it close, and if they can pull up a win, I think they'll be fine. But if they lose those games and continue to struggle like they did against Texas Tech tonight, then yeah, it's going to be a long season, and you can start sweating after that.
I am 100 on this sweatboard. Zach Beeler and I have been not very high on Northwestern all year. The loss to Creighton was not surprising, and the loss to Texas Tech not surprising at all. Texas Tech played very well this year. I'm surprised they beat LaSalle. They were able to pull that one out, only winning by 8 against a non-top 100 team. But they put all they had in the last season getting into the tournament. So it feels like they've kind of accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. And this entire offense is Brian McIntosh. And so they've got to kind of spread the ball around. Vic Law's got to step up. And the other thing that needs to be mentioned is they're playing their home games way away from campus. So there's not going to be very many students there. I heard for their opening game, they had like 600 students pay to have a bus take them to the arena for the game, and only like 200 of them ended up showing up, or like 150 of them. So they're going to have a hard time without any home court advantage. And, the same players, that they're going to have to take the next step forward in their games if they want to play well. And that's up to Chris Collins as well to motivate them and kind of push them to taking that next step.
How can you hate Northwestern though? Like, how can you do that to them? They're the little
because they're in the Big Ten.
Come on, how can you hate Northwestern? Just give them a chance.
I'm just not high on them.
Just give them a chance.
They put everything they had into winning and getting into the tournament last year. So now they're just kind of like, okay, cool, we were in the tournament, and now no one will be asking if this is the year Northwestern gets in.
Hey, but this could be the second year Northwestern.
No one will ever ask that. No one will ever ask that. Okay, next team, sweat or don't sweat. UCLA, they should have lost. I mean, they got super lucky against Central Arkansas. They won in overtime, but Central Arkansas made a 3 with like 3 seconds left, and they were able to drive down, and Jalen Hands was able to get foul shots to tie it and push it to overtime. But they were extremely lucky to get out of the game against Central Arkansas, the 290th ranked team according to KenPom. And then South Carolina State, they also played them very close in the second half before they were able to pull away. But are you sweating or not sweating about UCLA with everything that's going on off the court? And now they're starting to struggle a little bit on the court against teams that are clearly don't have as much talent as they do.
Yeah, I could understand why people want to sweat, but honestly, I would say that there's no reason to sweat, just for the sole fact that if you were expecting this year's UCLA team to be the same as last year, then you're crazy, because they have no TJ Leaf, they have no Lonzo Ball, and nor Chris Wilkes or Jalen Hands or even Aaron Holiday can fill that spot of being Lonzo Ball. I mean, just everything he did for that team, rebounding, assists, his vision on the court, he made all those guys better. And nothing taken away from Chris Wilkes or any of those guys on UCLA, but they're not going to step up into that position and be as good as Lonzo was at UCLA. Like, people can make fun of this whole Lonzo Ball situation, the whole LeVar thing. He was a really good basketball player at UCLA. And if it wasn't for him, like if he was not there last year, they probably would have been in 7 or 8 seed in the tournament, honestly. I mean, he made that team just as good as it was, and played a huge part in that upset over Kentucky early in the season at Rupp. Like, if it wasn't for him, they would have won that game. But, I mean, I guess you can sweat a little bit just because Thomas Welsh, I guess, is supposed to be playing really well this year for them and kind of fill a role that TJ Leaf had last year, and he just kind of is doing the same thing and just chilling up and down the court. But honestly, there's no reason to sweat just because the expectations aren't as high as they were last year, and you don't have as good as a team. So I think they'll still be a tournament team. They're definitely not going to be a 2 seed or 2 seed like they were last year, or 3 seed, whatever they were 4. But yeah, they're still going to be a good team in the Pac-12. I think they'll still finish top 3, honestly. But yeah, they're not the same team as last year.
I am going out on the limb here. I'm going to say sweat. They looked horrible those last 2 games, and the only reason I'm saying sweat is because Steve Alford is their coach. I don't think he's that great of a coach. I think he's a one-hit wonder in terms of the combination of his son and all those players and TJ Leaf and Lonzo Ball last year. That team was special. Lonzo Ball put that team together. This year, I think that Alfred's going to have to realize that these freshmen need to get the ball more. Jalen Hands and Chris Wilkes are very talented. They're probably the two best players on the team. Thomas Welsh will never step up and be a go-to scorer. No matter how good of a shooter he is, he will never be that go-to guy that they'll need in the post. So I think they're going to have to rely on Hands and Wilkes, and that's a lot to rely on two freshmen. And it's also a lot to ask Steve Alford to do something that's smart coaching. I think uh, people are giving him a lot of credit for last year, but that was a lot of the players' credit, and he didn't really like do that much to make that team more special and get that team where it was. I think it was all the talents of those guys that made that team special. So I'm sweating just because Steve Alford's that coach. They have good talent on that roster, but he's going to have to put it together unlike last year. And, he's probably going to get lucky again with some like BS goaltending call in a clutch game or something like that. It'll be interesting to see. They play Creighton tomorrow, which we will be talking about a little bit later. But that will be a critical game for them, putting it together and getting the ball in Hands and Wilkes' hands.
What they really need is they need LiAngelo. They need LiAngelo.
I can't even comment on that because I haven't even seen him play other than like mixtapes where he's like literally just doing layups and like passing it to his brother to take ridiculous threes. Like they're gonna miss something in the post with those other two guys though. Those guys were really highly recruited guys.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what their suspensions come about, but I feel like everyone's talked about that ad nauseum. So we're gonna recap some games this week. The two main games we want to talk about are the Champions Classic games. Duncan and I were there, so I will be able to give you a firsthand look at what went on. Duke versus Michigan State, first game. We talked about Duke going into his zone. That may be the move for Coach K this year because he wanted to avoid getting in foul trouble. Beyond Wendell Carter and Marvin Bagley, that front court's really not that good. Marcus Bolden's really not that good, and all those other guys are just not very good at basketball. So he went to his zone, which not only prevented them from getting in foul trouble, but it also prevented Miles Bridges from being able to drive and break down this guy. He's used to playing man-to-man and being able to beat his guy off the dribble and use his jumper as well to gain space. So they were able to slow him down. One player that really impressed me, Jaren Jackson Jr., he blocked shots. He made those Duke players think about what they were doing when they were going up for layups, and in the paint, he was all over the place. And he also added the ability to knock down some outside shots. I think the combination of him and Nick Ward is going to be absolutely deadly in the front court because Ward is a bruiser. Jackson can clean up the boards, block shots, and then he can also spread the floor a little bit, giving Ward the space he needs in the post to operate and be effective, which he was extremely effective. Nick Ward also beat Duke down the floor a couple times for some buckets, which is pretty funny. I'm sure Coach K really loved watching Nick Ward like rumble and stumble and bumble down the court and getting layups, especially after made baskets as well, which is pretty funny. But Duke, Michigan State, that'll be an interesting game. Grayson Allen absolutely went off. He's going to have to carry their offense for a little bit because they had some guys that really struggled from the field. Trayvon Duval was pretty good. I was decently impressed with him. He distributed the ball. Obviously, they didn't have Marvin Bagley for most of the game, which kind of changes things a lot. But Gary Trent struggled from the field. He's going to need to step up, and if they want to be successful, because they can't just rely on Duval and Allen the entire time, which is what they did in this game, which works. But they're going to need Bagley and they're going to need Trent to contribute down the stretch. What were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, like I said earlier, it was a really exciting game to watch. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was unfortunate that Marvin Bagley didn't play a lot because I would have loved to see him and Jaren Jackson and Nick Ward go right at it with each other for some more. We really got a sense of how good Duke may really be this year, honestly. Like you take Marvin Bagley away, this team shot 39% for the game. So let that sink in for a second. 39% versus 50%, 51% for Michigan State. And one player for Duke in Grayson Allen had 37 points, and they still won 88-81 with those numbers without Marvin Bagley. To me, that says a lot without even saying anything. Just the fact that they shot 20% less and had one guy score all their points, and they still dropped 88 and still won by 7. They don't. Jordan Tucker didn't play at all, right? Like, where has he been?
I
That,
don't know where he's been. He didn't play at all, and then they need somebody other than Allen to knock down outside shots, which is surprising
like,
that he doesn't get any time.
yeah, I don't know if he's hurt or if they're just waiting to use him, but like you add him into the mix and you're more deep. Like they look
I
deep,
that
honestly, they
that's the
do.
thing. I don't think they're that deep. I disagree with you. I don't think they're that deep. Like their backup
I think
guards
they were, like,
are not that good.
Delaware didn't play bad for what they needed him to do. He didn't play bad. Bolden looked bad, honestly, he did. But you, I mean, Bolden is going to have bad days, and he's showed glimpses of being good. So you have Delaware, you have Bolden, you put Tucker in there, and then O'Connell hasn't been bad too much. I mean, he didn't play much against Michigan State, but he played a lot the game before. And I, to me, I think they're deep, and I think that they can use all those guys in different ways, especially when Jordan Tucker comes.
Yeah, I just don't think they're that deep, and I don't think that Jordan Tucker's getting that much playing time. He played, so he's not injured, but it's just weird. Was he's a great shooter. I mean, he was a highly touted shooter coming out of high school, and a lot of teams wanted him, including IU. So I really knew Jordan Tucker pretty well, but I just don't think they're that deep outside of their top three guards. O'Connell, he looked like he was a freshman that needed some development. Jordan Goldwire, he looked pretty decent. I'll admit that he looked pretty decent. But in terms of replacing a Grayson Allen or Duval or Gary Trent, there was a drop off there. And the big men, there's a drop off between Bagley and Carter and the rest of those guys. You
Mhm.
really miss something with those guys off the court. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. They're going to rely on Grayson Allen a lot, and they're going to
Oh yeah.
need Duval and Gary Trent to play better. And I think they're going to get Marvin Bagley back, and he's going to play well. But Wendell Carter looked pretty good. He had some nice post moves, but just wasn't able to finish them. Like, he got to a
No.
great spot and had great positioning, and then had like a hook shot that is pretty easy to make, and just like it just rimmed out. So he had a couple of those. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's going to make those the next time he takes them, and so I think he can improve as well. He's going to be a nice piece for them in the front court next to Bagley. Hopefully that Bagley will be at 100% going in the future.
On the other side of things, though, what was up with Duke playing the zone? Like coming out
They
on the start, I was kind of surprised that they were playing a 2-3 against Michigan State because Michigan State ran it down their throats early on in the game and then laid back. And I think that's honestly why they lost that game. If Michigan State just kept pummeling the 2-3 zone and playing fast in transition, I think they had a chance because 9-0 runs at that point.
I think the 2-3 zone wears on you. It forces you to play the same game over and over again compared to man. But the issue was they made Miles Bridges into a jump shooter. He did not drive at all. He had like one or two drives. Other than that, it was just jump shooting. They would give him the ball and he would just take deep threes. Which, I mean, he knocked a couple down, but that's not his game.
Jaren Jackson was loving that 2-3 zone.
Yeah, he played really well in that first half offensively for them. The second game, Duncan and I both agreed that there was a big drop off between the first game and the second game in terms of talent and the ceilings of both those teams. Kentucky versus Kansas. I'm going to come right out. I don't have Kansas, or I don't have Kentucky in my top 25 this week. I just wasn't impressed by them. And they've got a lot of talented players, but they don't have a team. They don't have anyone other than Kevin Knox to create offense. Like, none of those guys are offensive players yet. They've got a lot of big bodies. None of them have anything resembling a post move. And Hamidou Diallo, I think he's very good and athletic, but the issue was their big men were kind of clogging up the lane. And when your big men haven't really shown that they can be offensive forces, you're just going to pack the lane. And if anyone drives in there, they're just going to get completely clogged up. And that happened to Diallo. He realized he can't go in the lane because, all his big guys are in there and the defenders are in there. And those guys aren't moving out of the lane because they can't do really anything offensively other than dunk. I wasn't impressed by Kentucky. They don't have a true point guard. Kevin Knox, their only decent offensive player. It's going to be a long year for Kentucky. I think they're going to lose a lot of games this year, and the SEC is very strong. So if I was Big Blue Nation, I'd be a little concerned without a point guard, without like a really good shooter, without a big man that has post moves. It's going to be a very long season for John Calipari, and he said himself he might even start playing zone because the team's just bad defensively, which when you have Hamidou Diallo, the athletic freak he is, you'd think that that would be a pretty decent start defensively, but not so far. And so it'll be interesting to see Kentucky going forward. Kansas, I was very impressed with them. Udoka Azubuike is just a man. He is a big boy. He's going to finish, and he knows his game. He's going to post up. He's going to get feeds inside from his very talented guards. I think the one piece that they need, they're going to need Billy Preston because they can't trot out four guards and Udoka in every game. They're going to need Billy Preston to be there as a second big man because when one of those guys go out, they're still going to need a quality big man. They can't rely on Mitch Lightfoot to play minutes in big games in the Big 12. They just cannot do that. He's not good enough. He's not big enough, strong enough, anything that they're going to get. And when Udoka Azubuike was out of the game, Kentucky kind of hit it, and that's when they went on their big runs to keep the game close. But when Udoka was in there, he blocked shots, he rebounded, ran the floor well. I was very impressed with him. What were your thoughts on this game?
Well, my thoughts on this game in general, I mean, we kind of touched on it last week in our last podcast. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to that when we were previewing Kentucky, out. But I mean, we said it last week that we're just not impressed with how Kentucky looks this year. They don't have a shooter. Their bigs look terrible. Like, if chance to be a really good team, Nick Richards needs to ride the bench. Like, watching him play it gives me a headache for a big man of his stature and his talents coming out of high school, and he's just getting physically abused by LeGerald Vick. I mean, that can't happen. And Coach Cal caught on to that, and he sat him and was playing with 2-3 guards at a time. Quade Green looked okay, and he looked a lot better against East Tennessee State. And for their sake, hopefully he can keep building on that success. But like you said, they don't have a shooter. I mean, Kevin Knox is not a three-point shooter. He's not a Devin Booker.
Yeah,
he's not a Malik Monk.
Yeah, Kevin Knox is a very good shooter, and I think that he's going to have lots of talent in the NBA. But he's not, like you said, he's not that knockdown guy that you run him off screens to make threes.
Yeah, he's not going to go 8 for 9 from the 3-point line and put up 45 points like Malik Monk last year against UNC or UCLA, whoever he did it against. It's not going to happen. And the guys like Quade Green and Kalea Jones, they're not capable of it either. So honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Coach Cal had Kentucky playing his own the rest of the year and playing a Virginia-type style game where they're going to play games in the 60s or 70s just because this team cannot score. And they've shown that against teams like Utah Valley and even against Kansas this weekend. And Wenyen Gabriel can't do anything either. Him and Nick Richards need to sit the bench, in my opinion. And they need to play these other freshmen or somebody else because these guys are just getting physically beaten down and just cannot make a basket to save their lives. So, in my opinion, if they have any chance of being a really good team and being maybe a national championship contender, they need to sit the bench and really find their role on the team because they're god-awful and bringing the team down right now.
I've already crossed them off the list in terms of national championship contenders. The personnel doesn't fit. I think they can be tournament team, advance in the tournament, based on matchups and everything like that, as we've said before. But getting in the tournament, I think they can do that. But personnel, getting a deep tournament run, I'm not quite sure that it just fits in there. So next up, we're going to look forward to this week. And instead of previewing individual games, there's so many games. We're just going to briefly touch on 3 different tournaments that are going on this week. Obviously, the one to circle on your calendars is the Maui one because Bill Walton will be at that one. But we're going to start it off with the PK80, the Phil Knight tournament that will have a bunch of Duke teams, or not a bunch of Duke teams, a bunch of Nike teams in it that will be this week. So there's a lot of top matchups. What kind of piques your interest in this tournament, Brett?
The jerseys. You haven't had a chance to
the jerseys are going to be cool.
They are nice. Those jerseys look really nice. But from a basketball standpoint, there's 2 different brackets if you're looking at the Phil Knight 80. You got the victory bracket, which features big teams like North Carolina, Michigan State, and then some teams that could shake things up like Oregon and Arkansas, Oklahoma. Bracket in the motion bracket, it's called. clear favorite to win it. And you got teams like Gonzaga, Florida, Texas, Stanford. So there's some really good and interesting matchups. And I'll give you two games, one on each side of the bracket in the first round that I'm interested in seeing. The first one is Arkansas and Oklahoma in the victory bracket, and the winner will likely play North Carolina unless hell breaks loose and Portland wins that. Yeah, that's going to be a good game. Arkansas loves to run the ball up and down. Trae Young's looked good for Oklahoma, and Oklahoma hasn't looked bad this year so far. And I think that could be a pretty interesting game. And it's definitely going to be a transition battle. And if you like fast basketball and high scoring game, that's going to be a game to watch. And then on the motion side of the bracket, the game I'm really intrigued in watching in the first round is Florida against Stanford. Florida tonight. Brad, who did they play tonight?
Oh, Florida, it was not a very good team. It was
No, it was not at all.
who was it? New Hampshire.
Yeah, yeah, New Hampshire. And they barely pulled out a victory tonight over New Hampshire, which was kind of concerning because I think they were, 20-point favorites going into that one. Shioza didn't look good, and Florida in general was turning the ball over and sloppy on defense. And then Stanford, on the other hand, they're a team to watch in the Pac-12. They could potentially finish top 5 in the Pac-12 this year and maybe slip into the NCAA tournament this year. And they're a good team and came in this year, and it's a somewhat veteran team, and they got leadership at Stanford. And I think Stanford can honestly pull up the upset over Florida. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. So overall, it's going to be an awesome tournament. I'll just give my picks on both sides right now. I think Michigan State will win the victory bracket, and they're going to play North Carolina likely in the final. I think Michigan State will win that, and I can't pick against Duke right now. Just from what I saw them massacre Michigan State with Grayson Allen just slashing them from beyond the arc, and the way that Duke is shooting, I think Gary Trent will have a coming out party in this tournament. I think this is the time that we'll see him. And if they have Marvin Bagley back, just give Duke the check now. Like, there's no team that can keep up with them that is big enough to keep up with them. Gonzaga is not big enough to keep up with Duke in the paint and even try to slow down Bagley. Texas, maybe Mo Bamba can do something, but they don't have enough firepower to beat Duke. And honestly, when it comes down to it, if you're going to beat Duke this year, you got to do two things. You got to force them to make turnovers, and you got to make your three-point shots. And that's easy to say. It's hard to do. So if there's a team that can play fast and force Duke to step out of their comfort zone, and it will probably be teams in the ACC, honestly, then, yeah, they're going to lose games there. But the teams on their side of the bracket, I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some great games in here. First round game that I'm going to circle, Butler, Texas, two different styles. Mo Bamba, very talented, big, strong team with Texas. And then Butler, you know the Butler way. Watch out for the shooter, Sean McDermott on Butler. He got hot last game. He is a phenomenal shooter. They're going to run him off screens this year. I'm looking forward to watching him shoot the ball. Other games that will be interesting, UConn, Oregon will be interesting to watch. And then I think they're going to have some great second round games. I'm looking at a potential Oklahoma-UNC matchup as well. Maybe an Oregon-Michigan State matchup. There's a lot of potential great matchups in here. So that'll be interesting. In terms of picking a winner, I'm going to go with Michigan State for the victory bracket, and then the motion bracket. I'm going to go with Duke as well. I just don't think there's enough firepower in here to get over Duke. I would love to see a potential Duke Gonzaga matchup, though, as we go along in this tournament. I think even the consolation games are going to be good. These are a lot of good teams, so it'll be fun to watch. All right, next up, we're going to talk about the Maui Invitational Tournament. Here's the field for this year. It is LSU, Michigan, Notre Dame, Chaminade, California, Wichita State, Marquette, and VCU. So, Brett, what are you looking forward to watching in this tournament, and what is your pick for your champion?
I'm looking forward to the championship game in Wichita State versus Notre Dame because VCU and Marquette, none of those are going to beat Wichita State. And Michigan or LSU is not going to beat Notre Dame unless it's just one of those days where it's a black moon or whatever is out and somebody drops 40 points on one of these teams and have a career day. Like, when you look at the rosters and you look at the stats, these teams shouldn't lose. So unless something freaky happens, which it could, it's college basketball. But Michigan and LSU, they don't have a chance against Notre Dame, in my opinion. I give Notre Dame a 96% chance to win that game against whoever they play. And then Wichita State against Marquette or VCU. I think, honestly, VCU is the better team against Marquette just with their defensive awareness. That'll probably be a good game to watch, VCU and Marquette in the first round. And you'll see a lot of defense there, and it could be high scoring, honestly, because Marquette shot really well the other night in their game against Purdue, I believe it was. So Wichita State and Notre Dame in the final, and that will be a close one. But I'm going to give it to Wichita State. I've been really high on Wichita State to start the season. Lots of veteran leadership there, some really good players, and I think Wichita State will honestly. I think Wichita State is a really good team this year, and they're one of my picks to make the Final Four this year in my preseason. And they're a really good team. I don't see them slowing down yet.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great field. I'm looking forward to watching Marcus Howard of Marquette. VCU, they're a good team as well. Wichita State, obviously, all the hype. I'm very excited to see them on the court for the first time this year. Notre Dame, very talented team, lots of returners. Michigan, John Beilein, he's a great coach. He's going to put out a good team there. I think the thing to note is, it seems pretty straightforward, like it's going to be Notre Dame, Wichita State. But then again, a few years ago when Indiana was in it, you got to remember these are college kids over Thanksgiving break that are playing basketball in Hawaii, and then they're playing basketball 3 days in a row. So you could have teams that don't play as well, teams that play as well. It's a shoebox gym that you're playing in, so guys aren't used to that. So as much as it seems straightforward, it's still going to provide great games just because of the fact that it's not like a normal college basketball environment. Even for November, it's a completely different environment on an island that's over a Thanksgiving break when everyone else is home. So it'll be interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to seeing these teams play, though, and I'm looking forward to Bill Walton calling it. I think it's going to be tremendous. Bill Walton always does a good job keeping you on your toes. All right, next up, finally, we are going to break down the 4-team tournament that is the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City. Just 4 teams in this one. Creighton versus UCLA in the first game. That starts tomorrow. Baylor, Wisconsin right after that. 4 great teams, that have NCAA tournament aspirations, and then they play. The winners play and the losers play the next day. What are your thoughts on this tournament with these 4 teams?
Yeah, the first game of the day is 6 p.m. On ESPNU, and that's Creighton against UCLA. And this kind of builds off what we were talking about earlier with UCLA. They need to show us something to prove to us that we shouldn't worry about them. And this is a perfect game to do so. Creighton has looked really good to start the season. And if they knock off UCLA, they'll probably be in the top 25 because that's 2 top 25 wins right away to start off the season. And they're honestly not bad this year. Everybody thought Creighton was going to take a step back, and they're looking solid to start the year. So if Creighton comes out and is able to handle UCLA easily, they're easily going to be a top 25 team. And then they'll take on either Baylor or Wisconsin, the winner of that game. And that's going to be another good game. Baylor's looked really good defensively to start the season. They're big, they're lengthy. And then Wisconsin has Ethan Happen. He's looked really good, and they have some key pieces there. So that's going to be another good battle inside in the paint. I don't think either of these games will really come down to a big shooting game per se. I think it will be more of a scoring in the 70s per se in both these games. And then the championship game, honestly, I think Creighton will upset UCLA, and I think they're going to be playing Wisconsin, and that's going to be a good game. Honestly, I can't choose a winner on that one right now. I'd have to see how they play in their first games, but Creighton versus Wisconsin, that would be my prediction for the championship game. That's going to be a pretty wild one. I think that would be a really good game.
Yeah, the thing I love about this is it's not a huge tournament, but you got 4 great teams. It's going to be very quality basketball. These teams are going to be running up and down the floor, different styles, but quality players, great coaches. It'll be fun to watch. I think Demetric Tyson needs to have a big game for Wisconsin to get over Baylor. He needs to play well all season as their point guard, both getting it to Hap and scoring on the wing as well. Creighton versus UCLA. I'm picking Creighton. I picked Creighton, and I watched them kind of pick apart Northwestern. So I think they're going to be a pretty good team. One of the front court players is injured, but I think he may be back by then. But Marcus Foster, Kyrie Thomas, both very talented guys in the backcourt there. They're going to lead the way, and Marcus Foster can absolutely fill it up. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that. In terms of my pick, I'm going to pick Creighton to win it all against Wisconsin in the championship game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. quick programming note before we get to our final thoughts. This week is so jam-packed with college basketball that we're going to be giving you our picks each and every day. We're going to be posting the picks because we're going to be doing so many of them with all of our writers. So Brett's heading up our pick'em this year with all of our writers. He's doing a great job with that, keeping track of how everyone's doing. I'm not happy with how I'm doing, but I'm going to hopefully turn it around this week. So we will definitely see, but we're going to be posting it every day. So be sure to look out for that. It should be up around noon, and it'll have the picks for all of the top games. And we have a bunch of writers there too. So it's not just a couple biased writers that are doing those picks. So that should be a lot of fun, something to look out for, as well as our regularly scheduled weekly content. So we're going to wrap it up here with our closing thoughts of this week. Any Thanksgiving basketball thoughts you want to get in there? Now is the chance to get them. So I'll let you take over, Brett.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun week. We got lots of non-conference tournaments and lots of great games, like we mentioned. Creighton game tomorrow night and Baylor versus Wisconsin. Those are both going to be really good games. And then following the next day, we got the Maui starting tomorrow, and then second round is Tuesday, followed by Wednesday with the championship. And then once that ends, Thursday the next tournament starts, and then Friday the next one starts with the Phil Knight. So if you want to see some high level basketball and you want to see some really good college basketball games, and you were just waiting for college basketball to return this season, wait for you, because it's a dream come true for college basketball fans to watch all these tournaments. I mean, you really get a feel for what each team looks like. And we saw it last year. We saw some great teams emerge in the preseason tournaments or the pre-conference tournaments. And those teams showed it come time for March. And I think we're going to see a glimpse of some really good teams this year, and could kind of foreshadow some things that are going to happen in March. But for the most part, I think we'll likely see the Michigan States and the Dukes and the Arizonas. We'll see them roll. But some of the lesser top 25 teams and some teams that we have question marks on, those could be the teams that get upset this week and show their true colors.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. So many tournaments, a lot of different intriguing matchups to watch. I'm looking forward to it. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at EDU Pride Press. We're going to have all of our updates, and we're going to be posting our poll and all of our content there as well. Should be a lot of fun. Have a great Thanksgiving. If you're traveling, be sure to be safe. And if you're listening to this podcast while you're traveling, I love it. Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy time with your family and eat lots of turkey and watch lots of Bill Walton making a fool of himself. So it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.